A successful boss with an unshakable beef work hard, and you'll get what Yautserv he paid his employees fairly expected. Them to put in the effort and never questioned what happened after the clocked out until one night he deed a hard-working employee. Lingered late just to receive a takeout container, tucked away like a secret, but when Huno Ainley followed her home that night what he saw shattered everything he thought he knew about work. Success Andy. Cost of survival, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if hard work was enough. Malcolm Reed had built this empire from nothing. He didn't. Herrick Wealth didn't have a safety net. Didn't rely on handouts, only hard work, sleepless nights, and an unshakable belief that discipline was the foundation of success. Red Logistics, his brainchild, had started as a one-man tracking operation in Atlanta, Georgia, and over the years it had transformed into a formidable name in the industry with fleets running across the country. People respected him, feared him, even who was known as a man who never missed a deadline, who pushed his employees hard, but paid them well. If you worked at Real Logistics, you worked to win. That was thorough. That was the only way. But even a man like Malcolm, with all his convictions, had blind spots that night as he sat in his glass-walled office. Reviewing the quarter's performance metrics, something outside caught his eye. The building had emptied by now. Now only the cleaning crew remained, making their rounds, yet in the dim glow of the break room down the hall, a figure lingered. Naomi Hayes. And you. Her, though not personally, she was some of those employees who never made a noise, never slacked off, never needed a sickened reminder if there was overtime available. Now she took it. Shifts needed coverage. She was there, the kind off worker every employer wanted. The kindwo didn't ask for favors, which was why what he saw next didn't sit right. With him, Nomi stood near the food counter. Low posture, uncertain, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, as if debating whether she should even bother. The cafeteria had closed hours. Agoya, she approached the cook, a man Malcolm barely knew but recognized from the few times he'd grabbed a late-night coffee. Their conversation was brief, hushed, quiet for Malcolm to hear, but the way the cook's brows knitted together. Way he hesitated before finally reacting under the counter for a takeout, Kinnear told Malcolm all he needed to know. Nomi's shoulders dropped in what looked like relief as she murmured a thank you, quickly stuffing the container into Hera Versailles' tote bag. Before glancing around, checking to see if anyone had noticed, then she turned, walking briskly toward the exit, head down. Pace hurried but Tillabet. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, fingers tented in front of him, staring at the now empty cafeteria. He wasn't the type of boss who meddled in his employees' personal live-a-stat. Wasn't how he ran things. You work it hard. You got paid simple fare. But Naomi worked more than most. She pulled double shifts, summertime even, triple. If anyone should have been able to afford a meal, it was her, so why did she have to ask for one? The thought gnawed at him, unsettling in a way. Eccleston explained maybe it was nothing, Mabe. She just forgot her wallet. Mabesh was saving money for something bigger. Maybe it wasn't his problem yet. As he turned back to his reports, then birds on the screen, blurred, meaningless. The only thing his mind fixated on was that single image, Naomi stuffing a takeout container into her bag like it was something she wasn't supposed to have. And what if there was more to it? Malcolm wasn't an impulsive man. He didn't make decisions based on fleeting emotions, but as he stood rolling his sleeves up his feet, moved before his logic could stop them by thought time, he stepped outside. The night air was cool, crisp, biting against his skyend. Naomi was already in the distance, walking toward the nearest bus stop. No car keys, no waiting ride, just her Anthe. Wait. On her back, Malcolm hesitated. This was crossing a line, and yet, when the next bus arrived and Naomi stepped on, he found himself doing thesum. The bus rattled forward, its demover headlights flickering every few scans, casting brief flashes of harsh white. Across the rows of mostly empty seats, Malcolm sat toward the back for now, to avoid drawing attention, but close enough to watch. Naomi had taken a ziat near the middle, her posture slouched, her head resting against the cold window. She looked exhausted. Not fecund of tired that sleep could fix, but kind that settled deep in the bones, kind that came from carrying too much for too long. The city passed an obler outside the neon glow of gas stations, the warm lit windows of late-night diners, the Endless stream of headlights stretching down the highway. Butas the bus pushed farther from Thebesinas district. The landscape began. Top changed the buildings, grew smaller, older streets darkened, the sidewalks cracked, and uneven the storefront. With boarded-up windows and chain-link fences, Malcolm realized thought he had never been to this part of Atlanta. Not really it existed in Thotham City on the same maps, but it was a different world. Naomi barely moved shed and check her phone. She didn't fidget, just stared out the window with the kind of quiet acceptance that Mediz, something uneasy stir inside him. How many nights had she done this? How many times had she ridden this same bus, taken this same route home after working shifts? That should have been impossible. The bus slowed. Naomi pulled a stop cord without hesitation, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. As the doors hissed open, she adjusted. Strap of her tote bag, pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. Malcolm Hades. This was going too far, but his feet moved anyway. He exited a few paces behind her, keeping his distance. Hishins shoved into the pockets of his still-art coat. The air smelled like rain and pavement, damp and heavy. Street lights flickered, some working, some not. The houses here weren't abandoned, but they weren't well kept. Their paint peeled. From the siding, mailboxes leaned at odd angles, the kind of place where people didn't expect much, where survival came. Comfort. Naomi walked with purpose. Even in exhaustion, she turned a corner past a row of rusted railings and dimly lit porches until she reached Asmel apartment complex, one that had clearly seen better days. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, pulled out their keys, and pushed open the door. Malcolm slowed his steps, stopping just before the building through the thin yellowed curtains. He saw it. The apartment was bare now, not the kind off bare where someone had just moved in, but kind where someone had been living with nothing for a long time. No couch, no dining table, no signs of comfort, just a single mattress on the floor, a few blankets, a plastic crate with neatly folded clothes stacked on top, and then two small heads peeked out from the city of the mattress. Children, on Malcolm's stomach tightened. Naomi knelt beside them, her movements slow but careful. Her ox's housechin pushed aside the moment she saw their faces. She set the take-it container on the floor, opening it with deliberate gentleness. Like it wassoming, fragile, the kids, a boy and a girl, no older than 5 or 6, scoot forward immediately, eyes wide, move. Meant skick, not the casual reach of kids grabbing a snack, but the urgent kind, off hunger, the kind that came from waiting too long. She split the meal between them, making sure each got an equal share. Butch didn't eat. She just watched. Malcolm stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had spent years building a business, pushing employees to work harder, faster, longer, but had he ever really looked at them? Had he ever stopped to consider what happened after they clocked out? Naomi wasn't just working double shifts, she was surviving them. A gust of wind swept down The Street, rattling a loose metal signer bee. Malcolm took a step back, his min dressing, his chest tight. He needed to live. This wasn't his business. He hadn't already seen too much. But as he turned, Asmal's voice cut through the night. "Mamier, we're going to have breakfast tomorrow." Malcolm froze. Naomi hesitated just for a second, then with quiet certainty, she smoothed her daughter's curls back from her face and whispered, "Of course, baby, you'll figure it out." She smiled, but Malcolm saw it for what it wasn't real. It was a shield, a fragile thing meant to comfort someone else, another self. And just like that, some of them sighed. Him shifted, because this wasn't just an unfortunation. This was a broken system, and for the first time, he wasn't sure I've just working hard was enough to fix it. Next morning, Malcolm sat at his desk staring at his laptop screen, but the numbers in front of him blurred inner meaningless shapes. For the first time in years, work didn't hold his focus. His mind was somewhere else, in a dimly lit apartment on a cold floor, watching 2 hungry children eat from a takeout container their mother had to ask, for he had spent the night turning eat over in his head, trying to rationalize ATO, trying to convince himself that he had no obligation to get involved. Naomi had a job, she worked hard, he paid his employees fairly. If she was struggling, it wasn't on him. That was life. That was the way the world worked, except that logic felt hollow now. A soft knock at his office door pulled him back. His assistant peered inside her, expression unbridled. Naomi Hayes is here to see you, she said. Malcolm straightened Heist's expression, smoothing into something neutral. He had spent the past horde-baiting whether he should be the one to call her and wondering if there was a way to bring up what he had seen without making her defensive, but now she'll wash her of her own. Choice of that meant something sent her in. Theodore opened and Naomi stepped inside, moving like someone bracing for impact. She looked just as exhausted as she had the night before, but there were some thingles in her eyes now, a quiet weariness, a hesitation that hadn't been there before, sat across from him. Her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture rigid too. Controlled. You wanted to see me, sir. Her voice was steady, professional, not a hint off emotion. Malcolm studied her for a long moment, debating how to start. He had rehearsed a dozen different ways to approach this bet. Now sitting across from her, none of them felt right, so finally he just said it. I saw you last night. Naomi stiffened at it. Was slight, barely noticeable, but Malcolm caught it. Excuse me. I followed you home. The words came out even careful, but there was no easy way to say it. Her reaction was instant. A sharp inhale, a flicker of something across her face. Confusion, then anger. Then something colder, her fingers curled into fists. Butch didn't move, didn't lash out. I don't understand, she said, but her voice had changed. It wasn't steady anymore, it was tight, controlled, licks immune. Trying not to panic, I saw Yao take that food home. Malcolm continued, keeping his voice calm, steady, giving her space. I saw your apartment. Your Cashier breath hitched, and just like that wall came up. Her expression shuddered. Her shoulders squared, and suddenly the woman sitting in front, Feme, wasn't just Naomi Hayes' employee. Ish was a mother protecting her children, a fighter refusing to break. Someone who had been through this conversation before and knew exactly how to handle Ithis. Isn't she? Started shaking her head already, preparing her defense. I'm not here to judge you, Mal commented, leaning forward slightly. Andium. Not here to pity you either. Naomi looked at him, then really looked at Hymas. If trying to gauge whether or not he was lying, she was used to bindis. Missed, used to being told to work harder, used to people looking at her and seeing a problem instead of a person. I'm here because I should have seen it sooner, Malcolm said, and I want to fix it. Naomi swallowed hard, blinking rapidly like she was trying to keep herself from showing too much. You don't have to, Dathis, she whispered. Yes, I do, Malcolm said. Firmly, silence settled between them, thick and heavy. For the first time, she didn't heavy an answer. Malcolm reached into his disk drawer, pulling out a thick envelope and slid it across the desk. Toward Naomi's eyes flicked to it, but didn't move. This isn't charity, Malcolm said before she could protest. This is an investment in you. In the people who Makitha's company run. She didn't reach for it. I want to raise wages. Continued, provide better hours, childcare support. Emergency assistance. His voice was steady, but there was urgency in it now, something raw, something real in need. Your help to do it the right way, Toma? Sure no one else has to go home the way you did last night? Naomi's lips parted, but no words came out. Her fingers hovered over the envelope, then drew Baka's if burned.
Act.
Why she finally asked it wasn't accusing. Wasn't doubtful, it was just Terad Molkelmext. Because I built this company Hezed, and I let people fall through the cracks. I refused to let that happen again. Again Awami stared at him for a long moment. Slowly she reached forward, her fingers grazing the envelope. Before gripping it tightly, tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wasn't used to accepting help she wasn't test. To anyone even offering it, Malcolm at her gaze, his own unwavering. You don't have to do this alone anymore, Naomi. Swallowed hard then. Finally she nodded a moment later. She stood, shoulders squaring, as she held the envelope to her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Malcolm watched her walk out, something solid and unshakable, settling deep in his bones. This wasn't just about fixing a company, this was about changing lives, and he was just getting started. The door clicked shut behind Naomi, leaving Malcolm alone in the silence of Sisyphus. He exhaled slow and steady. Hishins pressed flat against the desk. Ash stared at the space where she had just been. Something inside him felt different, something heavy, something permanent. There was no going back. From this the realization sat deep and Hishis, heavier than he expected. He had spent Years believing that hard work wastes answer to everything, that success was a simple equation, effort and results out. But last night had cracked that belief wide open. Naomi had Denny think right. She worked more than most. She never asked for help. And still she had to beg for a meal. That wasn't failure. On her part, that was failure. On his, Malcolm let out a sharp breath, pushing back from his desk. His efficiency, a symbol of everything he had built, suddenly felt suffocating. He needed action, a plan, a solution. His finger was moved on instinct, dialing a number he rarely used. The call barely rang before a sharp professional voice answered Malcolm. Lisa Carter, his chief financial officer, greeted her, tone-clipped. Data tech, expect to hear from you before our board meeting next week. What's on your mind? Malcolm didn't hesitate. I need to talk payroll benefits, emergency assistance programs, and I need to talk about Ito Day. There was a pause on the line. Thina low. Exhale. You're not the type to make impulsive decisions, Lisa said. Carefully, what happened? Malcolm's jaw clenched. Hugh, ensure he could explain it, threw it in his chest the way. Naomi's exhaustion had settled in his mind like a splinter that wouldn't budge, but had built this company. With Lisa from ground up, if there was anyone Wow would understand, it was her. Let's just say, I finally saw something I should have seen a long time ago. Another pausathon, the sound of keys clicking on AccuBoard. All right, Lisa said. Tell me what you're thinking. Malcolm inhaled deeply, forcing his thoughts into something structured, something real. We need to raise wages, he started, his voice firm. I don't care how we do it, but we need to make it happen, and not just a couple of cents to keep up with inflation. I mean, something that actually changes lives. Lisa let out a low hung, the kind that old him. She was already running numbers in her head. That's a big shift, Malcolm. We've got investors watching. Morgan Steer's going to be pushed back. Let them push, Malcolm said. We're a logistics company. Lisa, we move product. We keep the supply chain alive, and the only reason we do it so damn well is because of the people on the ground, the ones in 3 warehouses, the ones in the trucks, Theons, who pull 16-hour shifts and don't complain. I built this company on the belief that hard work pays off, but what? If it doesn't, what if we're taking more than we're giving? Lisa didn't respond right away. When she fin Alyssa spoke, her voice had shifted, no longer skeptical, but thoughtful, calculating. By you're serious about this, did serious. Another pause, then more typing. You'll right, Lisa said. Then let's do it. We'll start with the numbers. I'll put together models on wage increases, see where we can shift funds without gutting. Bottom line, you want to talk benefits, do yes? Malcolm said immediately. Childcare assistance, emergency support, maybe even tuition help for people who want to move up. I don't want band-aid fixes, Lisa. I want long-term solutions. Lisa let out a quiet laugh. Not macking, but surprised, maybe even impressed. Well, damn, looks like somebody had a wake-up call. Malcolm rubbed a hand over his jaw, exhaling through his nose. Yeah, something like that'll right, Lizazid. Give me a few hours. I'll have a preliminary report by the end of the day. But Malcolm, if we do this, it's going to be a fight. Right, the board, thy investors, even some of the managers there. Not all going to be on your side. Malcolm's grip tightened around his phone. He thought of Naomi sitting in his sofas, her hands clenched in her lap, her voice barely above a whisper, when she said, You don't have to do this, then we fit. Malcolm said. Lisa chuckled. Damn right we do. I'll call you when I have numbers. The line went dead. Malcolm exhaled, leaning back in his chair. But for the first time in a long time, the weight in his chest didn't feel like pressure. It felt like purpose. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about doing the right thing, and first time in his career, Malcolm Reed was about to bet everything on Thepipol, who made his company what it waste. Boardroom was silent, the kind of silence that felt sharp-edged with tension, thick with unspoken resistance. Malcolm sat at the head of the long-last table, his fingers steepled. In front of him, eyes steady, as he took in faces around him. Men in pressed suits, women in sharp blazers, people who had spent years analyzing numbers. Bouthard never once set foot in a warehouse, never clocked in for a back-to-back shift, never had to choose between rent and food. Lisa sat beside him, her expression unreal, but Malcolm knew her well enough to sense the calculation running bend. Her eyes, she had come prepared, always did reports, printed spreadsheets, color-coded projections mapped. out every possible argument against what they were about to do had already been dissected and countered. But though didn't mean the fight would be easy across the table, Daniel Grant, one of their longest-standing investors, cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair like a man who had already decided hadn't like what he was about to hear. Malcolm, let me make sure I understand this.
Act correctly.
You're proposing an across-the-board wage increase, more benefits, a fund for emergency assistance send you? Want us to approve this? Why? Malcolm exhaled through his nose, because it's the right thing to do. A beat of silence. Then a scoff from someone on their right. Come on, Malcolm, Daniel sighed, shaking his head. We don't run a charity, run a business, RMP. Employees are already paid competitively for this industry. If we start handing out raises like candy, where does it end? And what do you think the shareholders are going to say when our profit margins take a hit? Malcolm's jaw tightened. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him, the skepticism so thick it was almost tangible, but he had prepared for this. He had spent the past week pouring over, sitting in long meetings with Lisa, running through every possible rebuttal. This wasn't just emotion, this was logic, this was strategy, this was theft. We run a logistics company, Malcolm, said his voice, even but firm. We didn't make products, we don't develop technology, we move things, and the online reason we do it better than anyone else is because of the people on the ground. One's loading the trucks, driving through the night, pulling extra shifts, just to keep this business running. There, not numbers on a spreadsheet of people, and right now they're being left behind. Lisa slid a report across the table. We've run the numbers. She said, yes, this plan will cost us up front, but turnover rates, those are killing us faster than any wage increase ever. Could the timid money we spend constantly hiring, constantly training, it's bleeding this company? Dry retention is the key to growth, and if we invest in our employees, no, they'll invest in us long-term. Another board member, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, pulled into a tight bun at the report, but didn't dismiss it too trite. You're telling us this is about survival, Malcolm? It's about survival, Malcolm. Said you think competition is bad. Now give it a few years. If we don't build loyalty, now we're done. We can either be the company people want to work for, or we can be the company people leave. The second, a better offer comes along. The room fell into anathrunco-fortal silence. Malcolm could see the gears turning, could see some of them already doing the mental math, weighing risk versus reward. Some of them would never be convinced, but some were listening. Daniel folded his arms, his lips pressed into a thin line. And what if this doesn't work? What if all we do is lose money? His gaze unshaken. Then I to Keith lost personally. That got their attention. Lisa's head snapped toward him, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. The rest off the board, however, murmured in low, surprised tones. Daniel narrowed his ICR, saying, "You'll cut your own salary if that's what it takes," Malcolm said, and it meant it, every word. "I built this company. If we fail, I take responsibility. I'm telling you we won't, because I believe in this, I believe in them, and I feel willing to put my own paycheck on the line for it. Then you better start asking yourselves why you're not Anather. Finally, the woman with the silver hair, her name was Catherine, one of their oldest investors, sighed and pushed their port back toward Lisa. I think she sighed, slowly, carefully. It's time we start thinking about more than just the next quarter. I vote yes. Lisa's fingers tapped dance against the table, subtle, but Malcolm caught the small sign of victory. Owned by one. The votes fell into place, not unanimous, not without resistance, but butte now enough to change everything. By the time the meeting ended, Malcolm stepped out of the boardroom into the hallway, the weight in his chest lifting. Lisa walked beside him, glancing up at him with a knowing look. When you said you were serious, she muttered. I didn't think you meant your own damselary. Malcolm let out a low breath. It worked, didn't it? Lisa shook her head. Buth caught the small smirk she tried to hide. Yeah, she admitted it. Did they stop near the elevators? The hum off the office filling the space around them. Outside the glass walls, employees move it through their day, loading shipments and soaring calls, keeping the companion of in ways the board would never fully understand. Malcolm looked out over his jaw set, his conviction solid. It wasn't just about one woman anymore. It wasn't just about Naomi. It was about Olafdom, every worker who had ever pulled a double shift, every driver who had ever missed a holiday, Every person who had ever worked themselves into the ground just to scrape by for years, he had believed. In hard work he still did. But no, he believed in something more. All right, Lisa said, crossing her arms. Now that we've got approval, who's telling the employees? Malcolm exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Back I am, Lisa, raised a bro you. Sure, this is going to be a shakia, Malcolm said, nodding, already stepping forward, already ready for the fight ahead. And I want them to hear it. For me, join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn in the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.